All right, there it is, Alex Ross in a brand new Mazda CX-9. It's Con Carne. I can't even see how we look because the glare is so intense right now. It's gorgeous. Maybe if I do this. How are we looking?
It was fine for me.
Okay.
So don't worry about it.
Con Carne, presented by the Autobarn Mazda of Evanston. This CX-9 that we're in, it's funny, I was driving on the Edens to come meet you, Alex Ross, and I thought, oh, this loaner car that the Autobarn gave me, it's broken. The speedometer's broken. It says I'm going 78 miles an hour. Then I realized, okay, I'm going 78 miles an hour. It accelerates so beautifully and so flawlessly. I wasn't even aware I was going so fast because it accelerates so well. And the safety features, as I was going 78, a little bit over the speed limit, don't do that at home. I love the fact that it tells me if I'm driving in my lane or if there are people in my blind spot. The safety features are extraordinary. This car handles like a dream. Autobarn Mazda of Evanston, 1015 Chicago Avenue. Alex Ross, are you ready to do this thing?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we tried. I swear to God, we tried to agree on a place to do this. We're recording on Easter Sunday.
Yes.
I did my best. Strangely enough, a lot of places not open on Easter.
Yes. A lot of places you wouldn't think of, like Superdog.
I thought Superdog's universal.
Yeah.
365.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So we're getting food today from a Starbucks.
Yep.
It's just the path of least resistance.
My most common fast food, honestly.
It kind of is for me, too.
Yeah.
I'm having the barbecue sriracha sandwich.
And I am having the turkey Reuben.
Turkey Reuben, happy Passover. So it's funny, Alex. I'm watching you on Seth Meyers last year, a few months ago, and as I'm watching him, thinking, Alex Ross is living his best life.
Let's not get crazy here. Come on.
That was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And he's a fan.
Yes. I should embellish more of this.
No,
so,
can you confirm that you are in fact living your best possible life?
Oh boy, I think I know what that means, and I don't like all the implications of that because there's all the things that you would wish you had done and projects. Like I view it from a creative level of like, have I done all the things I could create or do, stories I could tell, and I know what things I haven't fulfilled. But then again, there's the things I have, and maybe I'm only able to give so much. So, for me, that's almost a complicated thing to bring up.
Well, I want to talk about the things that you haven't yet fulfilled. We should mention that there is a museum exhibit of your work happening right now at the Dunn Museum in Libertyville. I've been to it. It's the Marvelocity exhibit. I guess my first thought when I saw there was a museum exhibit was, I guess what took so long? Because I've seen art gallery shows that you've done.
Oh, well, then you're not familiar with the fact that we've had some other exhibits outside of Illinois. So the first one happened in at the Warhol Museum, which is in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And from there, we went on to Massachusetts for the Rockwell Museum. And there's been 2 different traveling shows that have happened over the last 6 years or more. And basically, that's sort of an overall kind of superhero assembly of my work. And this show here that we have in town, or in the suburbs, is specific to this recent book release, the one on Marvel. So it's only Marvel-related stuff, and mostly it's just stuff I created for the book. That much of it is artwork I only created in 2017, or 2018, sorry, it's 2019 now. Yeah, but this is bringing it home, where I can actually see people I know at the exhibit and bring friends over, like I will be this coming weekend. I've got alumni I'm entertaining over at, people I went to school with I'm bringing over to this exhibit.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, one thing I really appreciated, you did a signing, kind of a meet and greet at the exhibit about a month ago, and unlike the convention circuit, people were allowed to bring stuff and you signed it, and
unlike the convention circuit?
Well, usually you have to pay for access to the stars at conventions, it feels like.
Yes. Oh, right. Because it's normally a pay thing. You get your photo, you pay to see them, you get one signature on God knows what, and then get the heck out of here.
You were magnanimous. I mean, you took your time with everybody. Like, I was watching you as we were approaching. I mean, especially with the kids. You were really great with the kids. Really,
was I?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to hear that. That's nice.
It was cool to watch. Like, you felt very supportive, and like you're drawing. I mean, here's this guy who did this painting of Spider-Man or Captain America, and he's kind of reaching out to the kids, and they're kind of wide-eyed, and it was cool to see.
And let's put it in perspective. There's probably like 5 kids that were there out of the
parents. There were a lot of parents
there
with
were
kids there.
There were some parents, but it is so much more that my market is the parents as opposed to the children. The children are there trying to indoctrinate to make them care about buying comics, which we know isn't necessarily where their lives are taking them.
Fair enough. Well, I guess let's jump around then. What is the state of the industry? I'll tell you cynically, I find it hard to wrap my arms around a lot of what's going on in comics right now. It seems overwhelming. Storylines, it seems like both major publishers are putting out more titles than anyone could possibly consume in a month.
Right, yeah. And that's one of the things that's been breaking the back of the art form for the last 30 years. And we don't have enough people coming into it to buy those regular individual comics, but we have a huge amount of people that are interested in the art form, especially with the growth that's happened with young women. Mm-hmm. It's just that the storytelling has kind of shifted over into, obviously, manga has been a big part of that, but then a lot of the way that people are getting their comics is from libraries, they're getting them online, and they're not necessarily buying the individual releases. Right. So that part of what we might have grown up with is kind of losing some help. But you would think the movies would elevate this, but it hasn't.
I've talked to retailers and they said that is not the case.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is crazy. You would think that someone would go see Shazam and then want to check out all that history, all that source material.
Well, yeah, they also didn't make a lot of it available at the time, and especially because most of the source material is so removed from the version you see in the movie, that becomes an issue for all these films, is how much they readapt the content to fit a new aesthetic, and then it barely seems to have a symmetry with the original material.
So where does Alex Ross fit in the industry? I'm assuming you kind of...
Actually, if I can almost grab a hold of that, I know this is me taking over, but in a way, the idea of where do I fit in is, I always perceived myself, aside from where I am in the market, but as far as what I'm giving to an audience, what I'm delivering to them is I'm trying to connect back with not just the version that I grew up with of things, these legends. I'm trying to present back a realistic, like, here's as if an actor is portraying this part. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to give you that thing back from its earliest visual model. I'm trying to connect back with the history of this thing. And so for the fans that have been with it for many decades into later adulthood, that there's a consistency between what I do and interpreting the thing as those characters may have looked in their earliest incarnations in some cases. And that there's a history that's worth knowing and respecting that often gets lost in the advancement of the art form. And that's just the byproduct also that happens with different art styles. Everybody's got to have a different artist drawing them over time, and then actors getting associated with a character. Like, one of the comments I got from a friend at the opening of this show was that he spoke to a man who was looking at my work, didn't really know my work, know a whole ton about comics, but that man said, well, how come these characters don't look like the movie actors? And wow. That comment itself just rips me to shreds. Like, oh my gosh, that's the criteria of evaluation that's going on now. But that's where somebody like me is trying to still draw a connection back, because when they cast a certain person, they do a certain redesign of these things for film or for just the modern comics, that somebody like me is there to try and connect back with what is the classical version of a thing, because that can get lost. That's history that's getting trampled in some cases.
I agree. Well, and even the historical perspective of the renumbering of comics. Like, when you and I were kids, comics followed the numerical progression. There was Fantastic Four #1 all the way on up.
Yeah.
But there are restarts, and I don't even know where to begin. If I've fallen off for a year or two and try to dive back in, where do I look at the release date? How do I figure out where these stories fall? And it's maddening to me.
Yeah, and I know Marvel's got a particular sin of doing that too much. Like, I believe in the time that they've branded Carol Danvers as the new Captain Marvel, in the time she's holding that name, they've restarted her book like 3 times. Yeah. That's a little abusive at a certain point of the marketplace, like, come on, you're trying to get the goosing up of support and people jumping on, but at a certain point you got to stay committed to, like, you've launched this book, keep going with it, stop trying to restart it. But their attitude is that you know what? If it does anything, we're going to do that. We're going to restart it.
And to be fair, we do kind of exist in this ADD culture.
Yes.
And certainly an a la carte culture. Like, just grab what you want, piecemeal. I mean, music's like that now. People don't consume albums the way they used to. They consume individual songs. The greater context is kind of lost. So I think that's true in comics as well.
Absolutely.
And for perspective, I can't even see.
I can see you.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's still running. I just wanted to show people, because this podcast is a general podcast. It's not necessarily just for comic fans. I brought some visual aids, just so people understand what we're talking about here. This is the back cover of the DC collection, Mythology. That's Batman. Look at that. There's Superman. Hang on, there's more visual aids. Now this is a coffee table book. Kingdom Come. Collected. This is the hardest book to read in bed, because it weighs about 50 freaking pounds.
Oh, yeah.
And I frequently read until I fall asleep every night, and sometimes the book will fall on my face. Don't read this in bed. That's. And one of my all-time favorite covers, check this out. Angel from the X-Men. Look at that. Beautiful. On Marvels. So, going back to where you fit in, are you, I'm assuming, you're at a point where you can kind of cherry pick what you do. You can kind of curate your own professional experience.
I can avoid drawing things I don't want to draw. And I've actually had to communicate in specifics to editors I work with about how I'm never drawing this or that thing. Like, I'm not drawing this new costume for this character because it offends me.
That's amazing.
And the thing is,
you are living your best life.
But there's, well, you can call it that. But I mean, I hate to be like that, honestly. I'd like to be supportive of everything equally and say, sure, why not? But like, say, I have no interest in illustrating any of the movie versions of things, because in a way, my effort, which has been for these 30 years of my career, has been to bring things into a certain visual, lifelike quality without having the aid of the. You know, I'm not working off of the photos provided by Hollywood. I have to shoot my own models, my own interpretation of these things. And when they've made these things so perfect in the way they are for film now, well, what do you need an illustration by me of that? Mm-hmm. Let me try and lend my efforts to a version of something that's maybe being forgotten or overlooked, and maybe a certain physicality for a character. Like, here's one of the truths that we know about when they cast in Hollywood. They're never hiring people that are as big as these characters are. They're getting skinny actors and saying, bulk up. Yeah. Or, don't worry about bulking up. We're going to put the muscles on you in the suit. You know, for fans, we know Superman's a 6'4" guy with mass.
Well, your Superman is always imposing. It's a big dude. It wouldn't mess with your
But
Superman.
Artistically, I didn't make that up. That's what Superman had been,
like,
and
dating
was
back
consistent.
to Siegel and Schuster. Like,
right. So when Joe Shuster was drawing this guy in 1930s, going into when they, had him appear in his own cartoon series, the Max Fleischer cartoons, that's a really thick-looking guy. And so graphically, that kind of got weaned off in the years leading up to, like, say, the first movie interpretation. And I remember as a kid, as much as I loved Chris Reeve, I was thinking, he's kind of skinny, isn't he? I wanted that guy, and he put on a lot of muscle mass to make it really look believable, but I was also envisioning a thick guy, a really big guy, and that generally is not what we're getting. We're kind of accepting that we're not getting wrestlers hired as these parts, with the exception of Dave Bautista, who gets to play comic relief in a part, but isn't, put Dave Bautista in a Batman outfit, and suddenly you go, oh, right. That's what Batman's shaped like.
Well, to me, The Rock makes sense as Black Adam.
That's because we think that his sort of ethnic neutrality means that he could look as Egyptian as anybody else when... sure, he's...
I feel like he had that one saved up, that comment.
Well, I mean, when I look at him, I see his country of origin. I see where he's from and his features. And, anyways, but I think it's great that he'll be playing Black Adam. It's the thing of, like, there's an Egyptian actor out there who's like, I could have done that.
Right.
But the thing is, we're still casting within who we have. The Rock is getting the part or he's had the part for several years because of his importance to audiences. He will get bodies into the theater, and that's largely what still guides it as far as adapting these things. If they were all taken to the point of animation, you start seeing the characters look like what they always were designed to be. These men that, or women that that are built and shaped a certain way, matching the artistic design.
I think talking about that historical through line, the ascent of Alex Ross in the 90s, the timing of your work arriving when it did was important, because in the industry, art was going in a lot of weird places. It was the extreme decade. Anatomy wasn't really considered in that decade in a lot of respects.
The most radical thing I could do is just draw things to look normal.
But what a breath of fresh air. I mean, I think you had the right style, the right vision at the right time. I mean, it was a perfect storm. I mean, you would have been successful regardless, but I mean, you really were able to stake your claim, because I don't know what was going on then. I still think of Extreme Justice by DC, and that still makes me scratch my head.
Well, the thing is, there were plenty of precedents to my coming in. The difference is those guys, those extremely talented painters that really broke through the art form in the 80s, had all kind of like abandoned it by the time I came around. I mean, you have a few exceptions, but like, say, Bill Sienkiewicz, I wouldn't have a career really without the trailblazing that he did. And Dave McKean and John Muth and Ken Williams. And so basically all those people did their bits within superheroes painting graphic novel series, continuing that format that was kind of inaugurated with Dark Knight Returns. They didn't necessarily have the burning desire to want to paint superheroes their whole lives. Right. And I guess because I'm that kid looking at what they were doing, I was a teenager looking at it thinking, oh, yeah, that's my focus. I want to really make that better, but you know, I want to apply the same reality or visualization to things. And so by the time I'm beginning to build up my concept for that in 1990, a lot of those projects are beginning to peter off. You've got a few things left over, but by the time Marvel's is hitting in late 93, there's like me and Joe Jusko doing the Marvel Masterworks set of cards, and not a whole lot else.
Right.
I'm probably forgetting some people's work, but yeah, there's a lot of painters that were doing this stuff, just not a lot of them kind of with the fanish drive of like, I'm going to be the painted superhero guy.
Thinking, I was leaving a movie end of last year, and that was when I first saw the movie poster for Glass, which you did. And it got me thinking about your relationship with M. Night Shyamalan. Do you think that relationship? Do you think that relationship will have a surprise twist ending?
If there's any more relationship, that will be the surprise twist ending. Sure. No, I mean, he was very gracious to me almost 20 years ago when the movie was about to come out in 2000, and then here we are. Right. 19 years later,
yeah.
I think, when the movie comes out again. So last year I was on the phone with him working up the poster based upon his specific directions, and I had a concept that I pitched him, and then it worked together just fine. But when he was actually filming the movie, I did work that appeared in the film, and there I was before. When he's actually in the thick of it is when I couldn't directly communicate with him. I'm going through an art director, and which worked out fine. I had to create a phony comic book cover that appears in the movie, and it actually is like a story point, which I almost would think, you know what, I'll do all this work, I'll put it in there, and then it'll never get used. That's a lot of the way that Hollywood works. But it, but otherwise, yes, I did write to him when the movie came out to compliment him on how I thought it turned out. But otherwise, no, I don't have him on speed dial, and you know, we're not buddy.
Fair enough. We could talk at length. We don't need to, because it's been discussed in so many other places about your use of life models. I'm thinking I could probably be a life model. Like,
anybody could.
Maybe like a Baron Mordo. Now that I've got the beard.